in the Canadian Management Professional Accreditation Program. In this module, we will learn how to identify the needs of potential readers and use them to tailor your message to the greatest impact. Secondly, develop the best format and establish the language level required to avoid wasting your readers' time. Third, know the do's and don'ts of revising and proofing to build credibility in strong but simple messages. Here's some background. There are two forms of communication, spoken and written. Writing implies formality, finality, and personal distance, and it is a far less flexible tool than spoken communication. Writing well takes time, requiring pruning of unnecessary words and writing to final form where each word contributes. Not one extra word should remain in each sentence, paragraph, and page, a daunting task to be sure. The job is to put your thoughts down on paper. Good writing conveys a sense of intelligence, that an articulate person is present. Writing a report is a way of communicating your intentions, whether to an employee or a superior. Many mistakes and misunderstandings within a company stem from poor writing, as the recipient does not understand the writer's message. How many times have your memos come back full of scribbles, requesting you to redo them? How many times were you frustrated because you could not seem to present a thought on paper? Purpose of writing a message. The purpose of writing for a business audience, called corporate communication, is to 1. Influence. Get information to individuals to influence a way of thinking or a predisposition towards a topic or proposed action. It could be to change their mind or set groundwork for future action. Secondly, to inform. It gives information or data to individuals that they did not previously have, or confirm or emphasize a point of view. Finally, 3. To persuade people to action. To give a clear action plan and ways to do it. In other words, get people to do something. When to write messages. Communication should take the written form under the following conditions. 1. The organization's culture demands it. 2. The audience needs time to understand and absorb the material. For example, the audience is large or geographically dispersed, and all its members need to receive the same message. 3. A permanent record is necessary. And 4. The issue has been discussed to the extent that the memo or report is surprise-free, and you have reasonable support for your position. Analyzing the audience. Before writing your message, you should analyze your audience and establish an audience profile. Ask yourself the following questions to build this profile. 1. Who is the decision maker or primary reader? You must find out who is going to take action on this proposal or information. That is the person or persons to focus on. Everything that is written will be aimed at meeting their needs. 2. What questions did or will they ask? Every piece of writing should be considered as the answer to a question the reader has asked or might ask. This may be hard to do when the boss is someone who expects everyone to read his or her mind. For example, if there is a request for a written communication like, read a memo about the meeting, try to get more information about what exactly they want, or a lot of time will be spent writing a great deal of unimportant information. Clarify and be specific. 3. How much credibility do I have with them? The writer must determine their credibility with the decision maker or primary reader. This will help them decide how much detail must be included and how much must be said about the work performed in coming to a conclusion. 4. How much do they already know? Knowing what the decision maker already knows will help avoid confusion, a lack of detail, or irritation with seemingly excessive detail. You must also consider if your readers will understand any abbreviations or acronyms that are used. And 5. What is their view of the subject? Writers must keep this question foremost in their minds to understand the standards by which the decision maker will judge the communication. For example, if they're a numbers type, then write your document accordingly. Here are some other points to consider. What is the management style? Who could influence the decision maker? What do they know? How might they react to the situation? You may want to address their concerns in your memo or speak casually with them prior to writing your message. Next, What questions are you attempting to answer? And finally, what do you want them to do? Ability to persuade. The next step is to ask the question, what action item do you want in response to your message? You must persuade them. Your ability to persuade the decision maker or primary reader depends on 3 elements. 1. Willingness to hear the message. It may not be the right time. The decision maker may not perceive it as to be much of a problem as your proposal suggests. The proposal may have to wait for a more opportune moment called the window of opportunity. The logic of your argument, too. This is crucial. So many reports are torn asunder for lack of clarity, poor grammar, syntax errors, spelling mistakes, and a general lack of theme. Lost in a forest of words is the poor reader. The reader seeks clarity, namely, what is the message's main point and what action is the writer requesting from them. A clear, well-written report is a joy to read, standing out from the rest. The logic of an argument is crucial in persuading a decision maker to act favorably. 3. The credibility of the writer. Your position in the organization, your experience, your technical expertise, your likability, your knowledge of how things work, and your formal influence with key people in the organization all add or detract from your own credibility. Active versus passive voice. Writing programs and manuals talk about 2 types of voices, passive and active. An active voice is one that uses strong verbs and the writer takes credit for the action, whereas passive voice is indeterminate, the action happening to the writer. Active writing suggests someone taking charge, a decisive person. Passive writing shows someone ambivalent, indecisive. Without realizing it, some business professors and instructors taught students to write in the passive voice as a way of abdicating responsibility for their words. How often have you received a government report that is pages long, full of obtuse, unclear jargon? George Orwell called this doublespeak, that is, writers hiding behind their words. Their intention was not to be clear, but the opposite. Typical with the passive voice are long, complex sentences filled with technical jargon, for example, engineers, corporate executives, and bureaucrats. Poor writers think that to impress, they should use fancy $10 words. What the pompous writer ends up doing is losing the reader. A writer who wants to keep the reader and persuade always uses the active voice. The regular use of the active voice makes for forceful writing. Active voices use strong verbs connotating an action. Using language assertively, having confidence in what you're writing and saying without reservations, is as important as satisfying the needs of your reader. Assertiveness means stating what you want to have happen and why. Use the active voice whenever possible. Here's an example of the passive voice. On Friday, a new location was opened by the Institute of Professional Management. A memo was written. Here's an example of the active voice. The Institute of Professional Management opened a new location on Friday. I wrote a memo. The active example is shorter, and it's clear at the very beginning who's doing what to whom. Organization in sentences is the same as organizing paragraphs and whole reports, i.e., tell the reader the most important thing first. Please take some time now to work through Exercise 1 found in your handouts for this module. With sentences, it's usually most important to find out who or what is doing something. Here's an example of a weak sentence. Some confusion is suggested by the information relating to fiscal responsibility. Here's the sentence written better. The information suggests some confusion concerning fiscal responsibility. Some people in business and government argue that the passive voice is more polite and dignified than the active voice. The rationale for this preference of the passive voice is that it is simply an excuse to hedge their bets or conceal their real meaning. The truth should never be concealed, no matter how unpleasant it is. Telling readers what actually happened positively and assertively will lead them to have confidence in you, and using the passive voice to shield a person or department will not fool anyone. However, it is acceptable to use the passive voice under the following circumstances. A. The thing or person receiving the action is vastly more important than the person or thing performing the action. As an example, President Kennedy was assassinated. B. The person or thing performing the action is unknown. For example, the letter was written anonymously. And C. You don't want to cause unnecessary unpleasantness. As an example, the city directory has disappeared from the library, instead of someone has stolen the city directory. Please take some time to work through exercise 2, found in your handouts for this module. Logic tree. Information should be arranged in a logical order to create the written message. One method to arrange the information is with the use of a logic tree. The logic tree looks like an outline. It forces the writer to stay within the central premise and, at the same time, provides evidence to the main argument. All other information is needless to the reader. Writers think that they can put two topics on the same memo or report. Avoid this inclination, as it will divide the reader's attention and weaken the main proposal. If you have two proposals, write two reports. Don't dilute, don't confuse. Once you lose the reader, they will not be easily convinced to listen or read your proposal. Information should be arranged in a logical order to create the written message. Pick only one main point for your message. More than one point dilutes the message and causes confusion. Every word or phrase must support the main point. If not, cut it out of the message. Use the active voice at all times and constantly try to reduce the size of the message. The amount of detail will depend on what the reader already knows about the subject. Writing to someone means that you want them to take some kind of action. Your ending should clearly list the action that you require from the reader. If you don't want them to do anything, why are you writing? Perhaps a quick conversation with that person would be more appropriate. Once you have created your logic tree, it is a good idea to leave it for about 2 hours, and go back and pick it up again and check for logical flaws. Here's a checklist. Use this to check your logic tree. 1. Is the main point the one concept that you want your reader to remember? This will be your recommendation or central point of your message. 2. Do your major points all relate to the main point in some way? In your recommendation, these will all be reasons based on criteria, evaluations of alternatives, whether alternative or criteria in an implementation plan, and steps recommended in a progress report. And finally, 3. If you have made any assertions, do your points all relate to the assertions in the same way? Are they logical and tied together to support the main theme? Please take some time now to work through exercise 3, found in your handouts for this module. Closing comments. When a communication must be written, it is important to get the message across in as clear and concise a manner as possible. Many people will read their message and decide that it is too short, and decide to pad it to make it more impressive. Do you as a reader want to waste your time reading volumes of information, or do you only want to read relevant points?